And joining me now, Dinesh D'Souza, host of the Dinesh D'Souza podcast, and Molly Hemingway, Fox News contributor, author of Rigged. Dinesh, the left wanted this to be a racial case. They were desperate for it to be a racial case. Your reaction thus far?
It's been so startling to compare the videos and also the facts as presented in the trial with the leftist media narrative leading up to the trial. For example, even small things that came out in the trial. At one point, Kyle Rittenhouse blurted out that his dad lives in Kenosha. And it turns out he has other relatives in Kenosha as well. And right away, I thought, wow, I've been reading for months and months that this guy crossed state lines. He was a chaos tourist. He was coming to Kenosha. He had no business whatsoever in Kenosha. Well, he has family in Kenosha. So one after the other, he's a white supremacist. He was chasing after those guys. They weren't chasing after him. Evidently, a lot of people were even under the impression that his victims were black. So, you know, you had this elaborately constructed narrative. And if I'm someone reading the New York Times or just watching CNN, you know, I would take in these lies. You can't even blame people for sort of completely being on the wrong track because they're fed misinformation on top of misinformation. Right. And it's only if you watch the trial and you watch the videos that you go, wow, that's not true. That's not true. So the whole narrative begins to fall apart. And yet I predict that none of these people who've been peddling these lies for months, almost a year now, are going to do any corrections. They're not going to have any repentance.
No, they never do.
They're just going to keep lying.
Let's get Molly on. Yeah, Molly, the prosecution, they also argue that Rittenhouse had just no right to defend himself. Watch.
When you get a couple scrapes, everybody takes a beating sometimes, right? Sometimes you get in a scuffle and maybe you do get hurt a little bit. That doesn't mean you get to start plugging people with your full metal jacket AR-15 rounds.
Molly, reaction to that?
It just is a sign of how incompetent this prosecution was. They were describing getting beat up with a skateboard, having guns pointed at you, being chased as just a tussle that everybody should expect, or this idea that if you take steps to protect yourself that you lose the right to self-defense. None of this makes any sense, and it really was shocking to see the prosecution make a case out of a set of facts that doesn't exist in the real world. It is, as Dinesh was saying, as if they took some of the media claims that were made and treated them as if they were real when they weren't. We were told that this 17-year-old crossed state lines trafficking a weapon in order to be in a place that he had no business being in to engage in vigilante justice. It turns out he didn't traffic a weapon across state lines, which is why that charge was dropped today, that his family is in Kenosha, and that he was asked to help protect some of the property that was being assaulted by the violent rioters who were engaged in such acts of destruction during that time.
Yeah, well, they want it to burn. Democrats want this stuff to burn. That is like a badge of honor. Another city block burns, fantastic. I mean, that's got to be what they're thinking at this point. But we have Congresswoman Karen Bass, who thinks that Kyle isn't the only Rittenhouse who should be on trial. Watch.
Here you have a 17-year-old boy who was driven by his mother across state lines with an automatic weapon. Frankly, she should have been detained for child endangerment, to go to a protest where he says he's going to help the police. I mean, it was ridiculous.
I don't recall Karen Bass, Dinesh, saying all those mothers who let their teenagers go out and smash things last summer, that they should be held responsible for any of that property damage. I must have missed her comments on that.
Well, I mean, this is the key point. I think the reason for the false narratives is essentially that the left is protecting Antifa. I mean, these guys that came up and confronted Rittenhouse and attacked Rittenhouse are complete psychos. And they're the ones who picked the fight. Rittenhouse didn't go up to them. They chased him, and they chased him down. So I think what's happening here is that a lot of the reason for demonizing Rittenhouse, well, part of it is that he's white. Part of it is that he's lower middle class, so he's an easy target. But a lot lot of it is an attempt to cover up for the crimes of Antifa, the crimes that went on at the BLM riots. And you could see the prosecutor, in a sense, blowing his own case by saying things, well, I mean, all they were doing is burning things. All they were doing is beating people up. All they were doing. And so you get the window into the left's mentality that if they do it, it's completely okay. But if Kyle Rittenhouse does it, oh, this guy's got to be locked up for life.
Dinesh, Molly, great to see you both tonight.